The word dungeon doesn't actually come from the idea of an underground prison as we imagine today. It derives from the French word donjon, which means the great tower or the central keep of a castle. So the origin of the word has nothing to do with being underground, but rather with the strongest part of the castle. The real French word for a traditional underground prison is cachot. Since these massive castle towers were surrounded by thick stone walls and usually had very few windows, over time they became ideal spaces to use as prisons. In the early centuries, castle towers were built square-shaped, but in the 12th century they began to be constructed round. The reason was the increasing use of battering rams. The round form absorbed and distributed impact much more effectively, making it significantly stronger. In the early medieval period, lords and their retinues lived inside these great towers. Even if the castle was captured by an enemy, these towers served as the safest refuge. Over time, they became places where valuable items were stored and where important prisoners were held. Eventually, the word dungeon came to refer to any kind of prison area inside a castle, especially those dark chambers underground. These spaces were not originally designed as prisons, but their conditions made them extremely suitable. In the early Middle Ages, imprisonment was not a common form of punishment. People were usually fined, mutilated, or executed. But during wartime, important captives sometimes had to be kept alive for negotiation purposes, and so certain prisoners were held for long periods. Imprisoning ordinary criminals, however, was avoided because it was costly and troublesome. Today, we're traveling back in time to examine one of the most horrifying medieval torture methods, the oubliette. Welcome to Medieval Archive. Pontefract Castle, built in the 11th century and once a magnificent fortress in Yorkshire, England, is infamous for its dark and oppressive dungeon system. Throughout history, it has witnessed many tragic events. In 1311, King Edward II imprisoned his cousin Thomas, the Earl of Lancaster, along with 20 rebels here before their executions. Then, in 1399, Richard II was secretly moved from the Tower of London to Pontefract Castle. It is believed he was kept in a tiny cell beneath the Great Tower. Surrounded by cold, damp, and darkness, he either was murdered or died of starvation. In any case, he died on Valentine's Day in the year 1400 at only 33 years old, paving the way for Bolingbroke to ascend the throne as Henry IV. During the English Civil War, Oliver Cromwell despised Pontefract Castle. It infuriated him because it was the last stronghold to surrender to the parliamentarians. He even persuaded the townspeople to petition Parliament for its destruction. The locals supported the idea eagerly, having grown weary of soldiers plundering the town for years. The castle was demolished in 1649, and today you can still see its ruins and the dark dungeons located 35 feet below. Originally a monastery, Chillingham Castle held a highly strategic position on the England-Scotland border. After the Grey family acquired the estate in 1246, King Edward III added fortifications, torture chambers, and dungeons in 1344. King Edward I, known as the Hammer of the Scots, carried out exceptionally brutal tortures here. Thousands of people, including women and children, had their limbs broken and were thrown into a dark dungeon 20 feet below, where they ultimately starved, sometimes even resorting to eating their own flesh. It is said that 7,500 Scots were killed here. St Andrew's Castle, built in the 13th century, is located in the Fife region of Scotland. Its bottle dungeon is a 24-foot deep chamber carved into solid rock. Narrow at the top and wider at the bottom, it had no window and no ventilation. Prisoners were lowered inside and left to their fate. In 1402, David Stewart, heir to the Scottish throne, was held here. Before dying, he was transferred to another cell, where he starved to death. Other nobles suffered the same fate. Now let's come to the oubliette, the forgotten pit. As terrifying as prisons were, oubliettes went far beyond them. These were perfectly vertical shafts so narrow that it was nearly impossible to turn, sit, or even kneel. Usually located deep underground, they were essentially a dungeon within a dungeon. Water and waste from other chambers often drained into them, making the interior perpetually cold, damp, and foul-smelling. Prisoners were sometimes kept here for days or weeks. Occasionally, a bit of food was thrown down. Often, they were simply left to die. The sound of the trapdoor closing above them marked the beginning of utter darkness. Beneath their feet lay the rotting bones of earlier captives. The only sounds were rats scurrying in the dark. Even imagining it sends chills down one's spine. The word oubliette comes from the French oublier, to forget, and such pits were used both in Europe and the Middle East. The Bastille and Istanbul's Rumeli fortress are famous for them. At Rumeli Fortress, prisoners fell roughly 13 feet through a hidden trapdoor. They usually survived the fall, but were severely injured and left there to die. In the Tower of London, there was also a tiny cell, just 4 feet square, known as Little Ease. It was impossible for an adult to sit, stand, or lie down inside. Prisoners waited in total darkness for days or weeks, enduring constant pain, and were brought out only for questioning or torture. Guy Fawkes was also held there. Nobles were usually kept in better conditions, but if they were thrown into an oubliette, it was typically used as a short-term method of torture. At Conwy Castle in Wales, there was a 12-foot deep oubliette, and at Leap Castle in Ireland, the bottom of the oubliette was lined with sharp iron spikes. When the castle underwent restoration work, the remains of more than 150 people were recovered. This is a grim reminder of how frequently oubliettes were used in the Middle Ages. Thank you for watching this episode of Medieval Archive. We upload new episodes every week. If you'd like to see more, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.